Hey everyone. So I'm just in the file that we did at the end of the lab, or at least what we had. But I wanted to kind of just go over um, what I probably should have done. I got tripped up at first, thinking it was a fully symmetrical shape, and then had already started. Probably would have been better to restart. Um, and I'll show you why in a second. We can still get to this result, but just a lot faster and easier. And then I'm going to just take it through and kind of do the next steps thing. Hopefully it'll give you guys a more full idea of the process since we ran out of time in the lab. So let's get rid of my backup. Because I know now this is not a fully symmetrical shape, the workflow is different. If it was fully symmetrical, I could totally just cut those shapes out, mirror it on all sides, and you're done. But since it's not, I'm going to box model it more traditionally. So actually, I can turn this on, can't I? Sure. Why not? So I'll start by doing roughly the same thing. I've got my Pura file over here. I'll make a box, shrink it down, pi the scale this time. But all I really want is this middle. I don't care about the rest. And I'm going to be just box modeling it basically one-to-one, and anywhere I see a change in form, I'm going to add a new vertex. So we'll start with this one. So this is representing the top plane here. This is coming over. This is coming down. And then this is coming down. This is one of those few times where I'll use Control right click. Can't really see the keys because they're covered by the white, but I'm just clicking on the parts of the image where these line up, and that is it. So you should have something like this. Perfect. Mirror that over and down. And now if I switch views, I should have points lined up everywhere that I could possibly need them. So I'm going to start by just moving everything on the y-axis here. This comes out to it here. These come back. This comes back. This goes back. It's fighting with me a little bit, but that's fine. Shouldn't have mirrored that yet, because it was just creating a bunch of extra vertices that were distracting me. Okay. And we can work on this one panel at a time, which is much easier. You can see we've already kind of got our shapes lined up now. Let's fill these up. And do the same thing we did in class, so just duplicate and rotate it. Hotkeys are the same for the most part, so like things like QQB that I'm hitting constantly, not going to change here. And I'm going to start to think about how this object actually breaks down. So before we went ahead and we just started connecting these things up, this time I'm going to just pay a little bit more attention to the reference and see which parts kind of like are separate. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all of these pieces are separate pieces on the actual object. I just want to take a look and try and get a different view. It doesn't look like they actually do much anything to show that they're separate here, but they are separate. Take another look here. Yeah. So to start, I am just going to move them closer together. I think we had the same thing happen in class as well, where the side pieces were smaller. I'm going to merge them, even though I just said I wasn't. Let me make it all one object. Connect this up. Connect this up. Another advantage of doing this whole box modeling thing instead of the other way. I mentioned not to worry too much about topology in this blockout phase, but we have much nicer topology doing this than we would otherwise. It's still not all quads or anything, but it's pretty good. So there's one more little detail, which is these inset parts. And I believe the easy way to do that is just going to be connect everything here. A lot of cut. Disconnected. I don't want it to touch the front or the back. And bring it down. So this part should have been done probably before rotating it. Go. Fix any minor inconsistencies. Perfect. I think I saw that sphere somewhere. I'll just turn it on. There we go. And this all looks pretty right. It looks like the sphere is a bit bigger though from this reference. As big as I can get it without it poking out. And I'm just comparing like this shape here to this shape here to try and get a more accurate representation of where it's fitting in. Once I'm happy with that, we'll do a little bit more of the in-depth blocking out. So right here across the middle, we've got this cut, and I don't want to do that by hand. That's annoying. This is one of those things that's a lot easier to just use a Boolean for, because it is just cutting out a single slice. I'm not too worried about the topology in terms of like setting up topology ahead of time for it to work off of, because it's just literally splitting the mesh in half. Those vertices won't need to lead into anywhere yet, so I'm not even going to bother making a backup mesh. Well, I think we already have one anyway. And I'll do the same thing as I did in class. Boop. Add a Boolean. Just cherry pick this object. And in this case, I'm just going to hit fast. See how that looks? Yeah, exact tends to have some problems. It's a little experimental in this version of Blender. But granted, you guys are using a much newer version, so it might be a little bit less experimental in your version. But for me, I'm just going to use fast because I know it'll work. Hit apply. Get rid of my cutter. Great. So looking back at this reference, I've got this actually as one piece here, which is interesting. I'm going to delete the top so I can just see what I'm doing on the bottom a bit better, and hide this as well. And the first thing I know I need is faces here. And here. And I'm going to connect these as well, so merge at center. Perfect. So this is the stuff that you kind of can't see, you know, just looking at it. For this kind of stuff, you're going to have to actually kind of go in and start to understand the reference a bit better. These got messed up when I merged all that, so I'm just going to move this up and over. They should all be aligned now, yeah. Same thing on the bottom. There we go. So if I'm looking at these shapes, we've got this little inset here before it connects the two. And if we look at the back, we can see it's kind of there too. And then we have a plane that cuts up and across the face. So if I was to actually come in here, I'll delete the bottom this time. And then the other side. So this is two separate objects here. Split them. I'm just going to use L to select all of this piece and H to hide it, and then I can treat this as sort of one piece. And I know it has a face, something like this. Now I have to be a bit more careful when I use merge by distance, because I don't want this piece to be merged together with the other pieces. I'm going to split these ones as well. Hopefully that split it. Did hide that piece as well. So now I'm working with just this one little piece. I kind of want to see it from the top and bottom at the same time while working on it. So I might go ahead and just unhide everything, and mirror it back down. And then I'll rehide everything that I'm not working on right now. You could even separate them into separate objects, but here I'm not going to. So this is about the angle we're looking at, and you can see how your shapes are looking, see how they're feeling. I think this is pretty okay. It's a little bit ambiguous in the back here, what happens. We kind of see it feather back, so we don't really know what happens on this side. But I'm going to assume it comes to a point, so I'm going to just close these off. And if I merge by distance now, while all those other meshes are hidden, it's fine. They won't merge back together while they're hidden. It only affects things that are selected. So now I'm going to inset the top and bottom faces here. Just hit I, inset. Seems to be about right. And I'm just going to hit Control E, bridge edge loops. Take a look here. Doesn't look quite right, but our reference image also isn't perfectly lined up, so we are going to have to use a little bit of just our interpretation as we go about this. But once I'm kind of happy with that, I'll unhide everything else and start duplicating again. So that's these pieces pretty much done as far as blockouts go. What else is there? Let's see. Kind of looking around, I'm still thinking that the way this is sitting isn't quite right. These tend to move in a little bit more. And I'll need my other geometry to sort of match that. Let's see. Did I merge by distance? I did not. I'm going to go in here and separate these again. Just hitting V until they look like they're separated. Perfect. And at this point, just noticing a few other things that don't look quite right. It looks like my inset actually got completely destroyed at some point. I'm not too sure what happened. So these pieces, it looks like they actually converge at these points. Or rather, there's a little bit more depth to these than we've currently given them. Do the same thing where just delete a side, and then one of these. So here we go. This comes in like that, which also explains some other problems. I'm just going to extrude this vertice out, and I can make a face with it, except I don't know which vertex. Oh, it's both. And I'm going to connect here. So I'll delete this face and reconnect everything here. This is kind of just part of the process, honestly, especially when you're, converting things 2D to 3D. I talked about it a little bit during the lab, where, we've kind of got to use our interpretation of things best we can. Not everything in 2D concepts is going to perfectly translate into 3D. And that's another one of those skills that you kind of just develop. It does really help having those orthographic images, but they don't always tell you the full picture. Like how these two pieces connect here is a little ambiguous in the middle, especially considering they're all separate pieces, right? So I'm getting two conflicting-ish kind of views where I see this here, where it looks like it's beveled, but in reality it's only beveled on two sides. And the only way to really figure that out is just by continuing to work on it and then realizing, oh, that can't work, so something else is happening here. So I'm just going to go ahead and snap this using that active snap tool. Select the bottom one, boom, done, easy. I'm going to merge everything together. We'll separate everything at the end, so we can just keep working the way we are. And I think actually I'm going to undo that. And I'm just going to move this out even a little bit more. I think it still is going to merge in the middle here, but I think it's going to do it with a little bit of a bevel on each side. So I'm also going to bevel this out. Yeah. And then we'll have this come in to here. So I'll just select this and hit G, Y, and then scooch it over, move it here, and then GX, scooch it over. So I have a nice even bevel on both sides, but it still connects in the middle. And then I'll just redo my face here because it wasn't connected. There's a tool called F2, and I think it might be default in Blender now, where if I just select two vertices and there's two more vertices for them to go to, I can put my mouse over here and just press F, and it fills it. So really convenient when you're trying to rebuild objects. If you do the whole like retopology thing, which you guys will be doing, you'll be doing a lot of that. So we've got one little issue here. I want a face on both of these sides, but obviously that can't happen right now when they're connected. So it's that time for me to separate them. I'm going to hit V a few times. So everything is separate. And I'm actually just going to take, if I can, just one side of them and move them over. I just want to separate these a tiny bit, enough for me to sort of get in there. Another way of doing it is just having them all connected, and I'm just going to run a bevel on this whole thing just to disconnect them. Looks like it missed some edges though. What's going on in here? So we've got one of those interior faces here. I'm just going to delete. It's causing problems. I should be able to bevel it all now. There we go. And I just want one really, really small. And the goal with this is just to separate them a tiny bit. I'm just going to delete the faces on the inside. We can move them back into place later, but this way we can get all of our geometry done. There we go. Perfect. Actually, I think I can just delete this entirely now, and I'm just working on this one single quadrant. And I can just do the rest of my modeling basically on this one single piece, and then transfer everything over. So this area is a little bit weird. I think connect that. A few areas where it just didn't quite line up properly. Great. And then since we know how this separates, we know that this is one piece here, and this is a separate piece here. So I'll do that same thing with these and just give it a small bevel. Teeny tiny. Not with the intention of actually, you know, using it as a bevel, but just trying to separate the pieces. Delete faces. I can select one piece and hide it, and then add our missing face. And then vice versa. Alt H to unhide. New piece, hide. Bang. Alright. I think there's one more detail. It's got these like edges on the front, these things here. I'm gonna unhide. I just want to add these little ridges. So you can add an edge loop, nice and simple, and then it's just being drawn forward on this plane. I know how to do it. Maybe not. It's staying in line with the angles of these. So the trick you can use is if you double tap G to slide, normally it just slides it along an edge, but if you hit Alt while doing it, you can slide along that edge indefinitely. So it'll take the angle and keep going. So now it's staying planar, right? This is still a planar face, but I've got that bit brought out. I'm going to do the same thing here until it comes out to match up with that. And it's just eyeballing it in this case. From the top view, I can see my proportions are off a bit, so I'm going to start moving things around a little bit. If I go to my side view, the same kind of sentiment is echoed, where this piece needs to be further up, needs to be further up here as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and start moving things to match that, at least a little bit more than they are now. If you match it 1-to-1, I mean, it's not going to be 1-to-1 on all sides. I can use my snap to active. Is this still kind of right? Looking right? I think my reference images are slightly different sizes, which isn't great. You should try and use reference images that are roughly the same size, but in this case we'll just kind of wing it. We'll move these in. Try and keep this area even best we can. Something like that. And if I start duplicating this or mirroring it, it should properly fill that shape here where it goes in as well. Perfect. I'm gonna go back just to make sure I've got all my faces that need to be filled, and all my faces that don't need to be filled, not filled. But it looks like if this were separate objects, they're basically ready to go. The other great part about doing objects this way is when I take this into sculpting, I only need to take 1/4 of it. I could take the whole object, but there really isn't a point. So let's see what else. So there's also this part I've got to do here still. Just gonna go ahead and take my knife tool, hit Z, cut through. So this is just a little bit too far forward as well, so I'll move it back. And that shouldn't affect the top view that much. We'll get that on all sides. Using references that are lined up better definitely helps. But you guys should be able to do that no problem with your orthographic models since you have pictures of them. Yeah. So also because these are in perspective, it's really throwing it off. So from the left view here, right, this middle piece is extending past the top and bottom fin because it's in perspective, but if I go to the top view, this piece is extending past. I think the top view is the more accurate one for this case, so I'm just going to move it forward. And we'll just call it there. The last thing I might do is just to make sure we're not accidentally merging things again. I'm going to delete all of this. I'm just going to move these up a tiny amount as if we're beveling it, just to again separate the pieces where they need to be separated. We can move them down a little bit more later, but for now I'm going to do it like this. I think that might be too much though. We just want to get it enough so that if we merge by distance, it isn't going to be affected. And if we wanted to animate it, we can still move the pieces around. So this, I think, is pretty much it. I'm going to take this, bevel it slightly, and delete the faces. And we'll add another face underneath. Perfect. In the tutorial, I originally separated them into separate objects, which is something we could do here too if we wanted to, but I think I'm just going to plow through it and we'll leave it there. Alright, so next is bevels. We don't always have to do this here. We get a good opportunity in ZBrush to create these bevels, and if our low poly is going to have, you know, just these edges, then it could work. But our low poly, as far as I'm concerned, is going to need more than just that one edge to support the look we're going for. So I'm going to go back to working on just my one quadrant, deleting everything else. I'll start looking at bevels. And I'm just going to select all the edges that I want to bevel at the same amount. So this one, and I think that might be it. It doesn't look like there's bevels on the back. So just these edges. I'll bevel in the same amount, and I can get rid of these sharps. Alright. You know, in the interest of time, I'm probably just going to start sculpting on this now. We'll worry about everything else later. But I've got one quadrant, and that's all I really need to start adding a bunch of detail. So let's just go in here. I gotta make sure this has a face as well. We might do 1/2, just so everything is a complete closed surface. This needs a face. This needs a face. Great. Now we've got a large bevel here actually that I'm going to just do first. Normally you'd clean this topology up. I'm not too worried about it right now. Because my key thing here is just getting it into ZBrush. Looks like I beveled them a little bit differently. Just gonna take this section and move it up. You normally probably want to be a bit more exact with this kind of stuff, but we're still in the process of learning, so actually it's just completely messed it up, so I'm going to figure out what happened and redo it. Interesting. This is going to be moved up. Just kind of eyeballing it, but I just want this to be aligned. Then that should fix my problem. That looks about right. These I should have beveled with those sides. Or what you can do is take the measurement and just reuse the measurement. In this case I did neither, but I would recommend that. I wouldn't say this is a super professional thing to follow. We're kind of just punching away at this until we get the shapes we're looking for assignment's sake, but also for learning's sake. There we go. and just duplicate everything, take a quick look at it to see how I like it, and I think that looks pretty good. We've got nice bevels where they belong. And this is a solid, basically final blockout ready to go. Gonna turn our sphere back on. I'll just work on it a little bit since we have the concept here. I can do that pretty easily. It just kind of has like a flat face in front a little bit. So what I'll probably do is just delete these interior faces. Oops. And make this flat. I think the scale is not applied, so it's messing it up. There we go. Yeah, we'll go with that. I'm not so worried about the sphere in this. I was mostly looking to use the shell as our little demo object. The sphere kind of doesn't matter that much. So there's one more weird thing we've got going on where there's clearly something a little bit too deep. These bits here, gonna move them out because we want our sphere to be pretty well encompassed. I think it actually should go all the way out here. I'll mirror it over. Yeah, the sphere shouldn't be sticking out when it's that small. I'll make it as big as I can before it starts sticking out, and then just compare that to the reference. It looks like in this picture here, there's a much sharper kind of fall off here than we have. If you look at the side image, maybe this is just a perspective trick or something, so we'll move it back. And that looks a bit better. It's like I mentioned a bunch of times too, this is the most important step. We want to get our proportions right. If it takes a bit longer than all your other steps, that's fine. I'm going to add a subdiv just to see what it looks like. It's probably just going to mess everything up though. Yeah. We don't have to worry about the subdiv too much though, because we'll be doing that high poly stuff in ZBrush. So, all right. Oh, something's a little bit messed up here. This isn't supposed to look like that. Oh, I see what's happening now. What? Maybe I don't. G. There we go. That's better. So we'll call these our, I mean they're not perfect, but we'll call them our final proportions. Everything works as it's supposed to. All of our parts of our ghost that are supposed to be separate are separate for the most part. Actually it looks like pieces like this are supposed to be combined. So let's do that now. Really easily, I'm just going to merge its center all the way across here. And done. This is now one piece. Whoop, I selected too much. Just going to delete everything on the back half. Oh, no. Not sure why it's selecting throw. There's still something merged. There we go. Delete. Okay, cool. So now we should be able to merge this together without it freaking out. And actually delete the faces on the inside. Merge the center, merge the center, merge the center, merge the center. And merge by distance, just make sure I didn't miss anything. We can delete these. Mirror it back over. Alright, now we should have everything separated into its proper pieces. That's a piece, that's a piece, that's a piece, that's a piece, that's a piece. Great. This next thing I'm going to show, it is kind of a ZBrush specific kind of trick. Whoop. Actually, one more proportional issue. Just these need to come in more. There we go. But we can use ZBrush to polish up all of these little hard edges and make them slightly less hard. To do that though, we're gonna have to do a little bit of UV unwrapping, which sounds weird in theory because we don't have, like, this isn't our low poly, we're not baking to it or anything, but we're actually just using it as information. We're treating the different parts of the mesh as different parts of information. So delete, 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 delete. Cool. So this is as much as we need. And at this point I'm going to add a mirror modifier to it because I don't plan on kind of changing it too much more. So now it's nice to just work on that one quadrant and not worry about it, especially when it comes to doing like UVing and stuff. There's a really easy way to do this. So what we're doing is we're telling ZBrush where all of our hard edges are, and then we'll tell it to smooth those hard edges. So everywhere there's a seam is a hard edge. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this sharp to pick all my hard edges. In which, I mean, they're already pretty much selected. And then we can use select sharp. Or select sharp. There we go. Great. So we'll see all the edges it's picked now. And I'm just going to instantly just go and mark seam. And unwrap. And our unwrap probably looks like a mess, naturally. But the goal with this unwrap isn't to get our perfect UVs, it's just to pass information along to ZBrush. Back to layout, we have this. I'm going to just turn the modifier off for now. And I have an add-on here called GoZ. And what it's going to allow me to do basically is just, if I click export to ZBrush, it will export this to ZBrush, which is going to open ZBrush and everything now. If you're using Blender, you'd be just duplicating this mesh, remeshing it, and going from there. I don't know that process. I'll probably try it out sometime in the next week or so just to give you guys more of an idea of what you can do with Blender, because I'm not too sure myself. I'm not going to use the new version. It's fine. And I'm just going to make a project with some default shape so that when I import, it has something to import to. Boom. There it is. So ZBrush is a bit of a weird program navigation wise. Probably not going to talk too much about its navigation because I don't imagine any of you are using it. But when you're importing to ZBrush, the main thing you want to look out for is like those planar faces, because it will start to add vertices in places where you don't want it. And obviously this has like no polygons, so I can't actually sculpt on it. So what I want to do is first, what we did that whole UV thing for, I can go ahead and auto group with UV. ZBrush is kind of nice. You can, this interface is really confusing. There's so much going on, but you can change all of it. And once you've watched a few videos, you'll kind of know what things you use, what things you need up here, what things you don't. So my entire workflow, I can just click through this top bit and I'll tell you what all the features do. The first one, if I just hit, where is it? Polyfill. It's going to show me my wireframe, but it will also show me my groups. And currently there's no groups or anything, but that's why we UV'd it. So if I auto group with UV, now you can see every UV shell has its own group, right, which is what we want. Because these are such small gaps, I may have to separate these objects. I'm not too sure yet, but the remesher might remesh them together. So I've got all my objects grouped out, and now I want to remesh them. So I'm going to just subdivide it a few times. Whoop, maybe not. It doesn't have its hard edges. Going to go to Dynamesh Master, set a poly count for it. 1.5 million polygons should be pretty decent. I'm going to turn blur to 0 and hit Dynamesh. Oh, because it's such a small object. I'm just going to do this as well. Awesome. So I managed to keep those gaps as well. So that's just another kind of unique thing ZBrush does there. But what it did is this add-on, it lets you set a polygon count for whatever you're remeshing. I don't know if Blender does this or not. I think Blender uses this like sample size kind of thing. I'm not too sure. But what it's let me done is I've sort of basically just told it, hey, this object's really small, so before you do any like remeshing, scale it up 5 times. So like, well, 5 times 100, so 500 times. And that way all of our like little tiny gaps that the remesher would never get properly, like this one, it's a lot easier when that gap is like 5 meters long. So if you're struggling with your remesher in Blender, that's something you can do too. It's not, you know, it won't be a one-click process, but scale up your mesh by a set number that you know, and when you're done, scale it back down by that set number. Awesome. So Shift F here to get rid of that. So now I've got this really high poly base, but you can see all of my edges, like this one, they're still like beveled, like they've lost their softness. And that's just part of the dynameshing, because I set the blur to 0. It's not smoothed anything out, but that was on purpose. We have all these different polygroups. Another unique thing we can do here is mask by feature. So if I set this to be groups and hit mask by feature, it's masking off all of the vertices along my edges, and it looks like I might need a little bit more vertices. I might bump this up to like 3 million polygons. But let's just see what happens if I grow the mask. So I can grow the mask, sharpen it, grow it, sharpen it, grow it. That looks pretty good. So now in Blender, what you'd probably do at this point is just take your brush, your smooth brush, and just smooth over everything. And you see the parts that are masked off, it's not going to smooth those, obviously. Do it one more time. Yeah. But in ZBrush, I can just kind of one-click that with these polish features. So if I run a polish now, it'll take a second. But you can see it's smoothed out everything. And I actually totally forgot to mask the bottom of this, so it's smoothing the bottom of this out too, which we really don't want. Okay, I'll fix that. So we get in here. Yeah, I forgot to give this a seam. So mark seam. I don't think we had it marked sharp either, so that's why I didn't select it when we did the select similar sharpness. And while I'm here, I might as well double check to see if there's any other I missed. I don't think there is though. Okay. And we'll just start that over. So import. Back to my tiny little mesh. Auto group with UV, get my UVs. Sorry I'm not talking a lot. My voice is kind of gone from doing labs all week and recording other things. I just kind of wanted to share the whole process with you guys since we got to sort of ran out of time. It's a little bit rambly. I'm kind of just playing along, doing things as we go. I'm hoping though that you guys have some kind of, like, if you work towards a like sculpt or like get to this stage over reading week kind of thing, and then we can come back from reading week, do a low poly, do our bakes, and start texturing. And that'll be an assignment as well later on, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks after reading week. But anyway, I'll do this whole thing again. Dynamesh, it scales it up, Dynameshes it, scales it down, it has all my poly groups. Yep, including the ones. Oh. Okay. So I added this seam, but I forgot to unwrap it because it's using the UVs. So let's do it again. You know, Gavin always used to say, "Oh, if you gotta restart something, you'll do it even better next time." And I used to hate hearing that because it just feels like wasted work. But it. He is right. Oop, I forgot to auto group them. He is right. Like, the more you go through this process, it's been a while since I've done it, honestly, which is probably why it's taken so long as well. But if you do this process a lot, it becomes second nature. You'll make better things with it. If you mess up and start over, sometimes it's the best thing you can do. Let's just run a whole polish right from the beginning. There you go. I missed a step. There's polish by features. So at first you want to polish by features, and what that'll do is just try and use your hard edges from the beginning until you get nice, right? So it's not going to demolish these sharps. We will demolish the sharps ourselves in a second. So I'm going to run one more just about halfway, just to make sure everything's super sharp and all of our other faces are super smooth. And now mask by feature. Grow, sharpen, grow, sharpen, grow blur. And now if I invert this, I can run a polish. I'll just run a full polish and see what happens. And if I don't like it, we can just undo it and try something else. So it's a little bit much. I'll probably just do a normal polish. Takes a second. Maybe I'll do a full polish, like, I don't know, like 20%. Not all the way though. And we'll just kind of gauge it every time we do it and see how far we can push it. I think we can probably get away with another one, like 20% again. And yeah, I think that should be alright. So now we have this really nice high poly mesh with all of these like just slightly beveled or chamfered edges everywhere. Pieces merge together nicely. We still have our hard separations, but we have nice little bevels in between them now. Our big bevels and small bevels blend together super easily, which is something that's a little bit harder to do when you're using like traditional box modeling. Some of these pieces, like this one's really small, so it got hit pretty hard by the mask and is probably rounder than we'd want it to be. But from a distance where you're actually viewing this, it's not even actually noticeable. So now what else can we do? So we've got our thing, you know, super nice. If I wanted to go in now, this is the time to do like little edge damages or whatever. If I pick like dynamic trim brushes, I can kind of just come in and like, you know, bash up this edge if I wanted to. If I was doing like a really battle-worn one, you know, I'd definitely come in and just destroy a lot of these edges. And on little things like this, you often want to think of like big, medium, and small shapes. So I might have like one big chunk cut out on an edge, one small one, and one medium one, and that tends to look the best. It creates some sort of visual hierarchy. If you're doing like just full this the entire way down, and it's like evenly uniform, depending on what you're doing, it could look good, but in most cases we are a little bit more intentional than that. So sure, I mean, we'll just kind of leave it at that. I don't want to go too in depth or anything here. It's not really the point of doing this high poly stuff. Mostly we just wanted to go over, you know, how to get these really clean edges, because that's going to be key for your realistic modeling assignment. Let's do another small, medium, large kind of thing here. Spacing, you don't want them to be so evenly spaced either there, so I undid that. Shouldn't be consistent, so to speak. But great. Let's say we're done with this and we're happy with it. We have way too many extra vertices right now. I could totally export this and use it to bake down, but it's a lot. It's going to take forever to export, import, whatever. So instead I'll spend a little bit of time to just decimate this. If I go back in here, decimation master. You can just set your target polygon count. Just a few presets. Just gonna hit 150K right off the bat. It's gonna run a little analysis on everything and, you know, do some math, figure out which areas need more vertices, which need less. Our big flat surfaces here really don't need that many. So it's going to remove a lot of those and add a lot of them in these little cracks we made. So it'll change a lot in a sec. You probably didn't really notice it changing, but if I hit F or Shift F, right, all of our poly groups are gone, but that's fine. We've already, you know, done our job with them. But all of our big flat faces have less geometry, just overall much easier to import, export, stuff like that. And since we're here, let's go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna hit Go Z. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna go back to Blender, save in case this crashes it. And I'll just make sure I name this like Blockout. We should have named these as we were going along, honestly. Yeah, these are all the other pieces from yesterday. Naming things is good, helps you keep organized. I would recommend doing it while you're working. I'm gonna hit Go Z import, which is basically just gonna emulate Blender as like an actual supported ZBrush program, because it's not, at least it's not any of, as of these versions, it's not. So I think it just pretends it's Maya. And yeah, it's gonna get angry at me, it's gonna tell me it's not working. But if I go into Blender, here it is. I don't know what just happened, but I think it just deleted itself. I'll just do it again. So you can imagine if this were like a 3 million vertice mesh still, pulling it into Blender would cause massive issues. Blender not super good at working with that many vertices. But alright, so now we have our blockout, we have our high poly. I'm going to add a triangulate modifier now though. I want everything to be consistent. I don't know why I did that. I want everything to be consistent when we export, so take this, export. I'm going to export as an OBJ. Everybody kind of has their preferences. Honestly, I don't mind OBJs. I think they're just the bare minimum of information, and I think when doing baking, that's kind of a good thing, is you just want that bare minimum of information. So here's my object again. Can I export this one as well as an OBJ? Same deal. Let's just call this Ghost High. And this one will take a minute. I'm gonna bake in Marmoset. It's really good at baking. I don't expect you to have Marmoset. I just want to show you the industry workflow basically in its entirety, so don't feel pressure to get these softwares if this isn't something you want to do like for a career. But if you are doing this for a career, I'd probably recommend getting into this stuff. So we've got Ghost Low and Ghost High. I'm gonna add a new baker and import. Where's my import? Quick load, desktop, and I'll just grab these two. And I'm not sure where they go. I guess I will do it manually. It's probably because I didn't name them. Like I've got cube 4 and blockout underscore cube underscore 001. These should be named shell high and shell low or whatever. Just gonna go to my baker, add a bake group, drag the high into the high poly, the low into the low poly, and now it knows what to bake to what. I'll use 2048. But I can go in here and I can check the cage, right? So we were talking about this in Substance. I'm checking the cage. Cage is a little bit big right now. Don't know if there's any overlap. Yeah, okay, so is overlapping this gap, right? And I don't want it to do that. So I'm gonna just shrink the cage down a good bit. That pop-up was because it's live previewing this stuff. Oh, I had more of my objects. So this is actually my low poly. So I'll export this now. Marmoset should pick up on that. It's pretty good about automatically updating files. So if I look at my low, yeah, it's got the whole piece now. That's a really nice feature. Really quick, really convenient. Now this uses more industry standard, so I'm moving around with Alt and Shift. Just Alt for rotating. There we go. So if I have my high and low poly visible, I'm gonna just click the P. It's gonna ask me where I want to export everything to. I'll just do my desktop. Ooh, actually, first I'm gonna check multi-layer PSD. You can export or you can import PSD into a surprising number of things. So if I was going to send this into Substance afterwards, I can just use the PSD file. And these are all the maps here that I'm baking. You can do more, but for the sake of this, normals, position, curvature, and these are all things that will be used in Substance. So I'll up the samples to 16, just assuming it's going to work on the first try. Everything else looks pretty good. 2048 is pretty good. I think we already did the cage to make it not overlap, which is pretty good. Doesn't look like anything sticking out of the cage. Let's see. I don't think. This might be sticking out of the cage a little bit. We'll increase the size just a tad. And now let's bake. Light preview, new path, desktop, and we'll just call this ghost. And it'll start baking. I'm not sure what makes it better than Substance Painter, but the results that it gets just tend to be cleaner. You have tools in here as well for directly editing the normals, so if there are areas that you know, didn't work out perfectly, you can edit them. So I'll hide the high poly now, and we just have the low poly. We could take a quick look at it, but it does look like it worked pretty well. We have nice little ambience occlusion in the parts where it would be occluded. We've got our nice little details here lined up. It's actually surprisingly convincing. I thought we might need to bevel these edges to get that detail to come across, but I think it actually looks okay. So let's call that a success. I'm not going to bother saving this file because the bake's already done. And now I'm going to untriangulate it or I guess I'll leave it on. And I'm just going to go to Painter. And this is the last part of this process. You guys already know how to texture. I wasn't really going to include that too much in this whole industry workflow thing. We've already gone over Painter, we've gone over Designer. I don't need to test your knowledge on that again. New, select, I'm gonna go slow. 2048, DirectX is what we use by default. And import baked maps. So this time I'm actually going to use this feature. You can see Ghost AO, curve, normal, position, thickness, they're all PSD files. I can just click OK. And by default it hasn't set them up anywhere, but they're in my file. So if I go to texture set, select normal map, I'll find my normal map, select ambient occlusion map, I'll find my AO, curvature, curvature, position, position, thickness, thickness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that is it. I'll click on my viewport, and now I've got all of that detail here in Painter as well that I just baked in. I'll just throw some kind of smart material on it for the sake of demonstration. Something maybe with a little bit of edge wear. Sure, let's go steel. I'll just go ahead and make it white. It's got a fill layer with the noise, and it's got a color layer. I think I'm going to bring the metallic down as well to 0. I think goes through like painted or something. It doesn't look like there's any edge wear. If there is, it's very minimal. So I might just, oh yeah. Drive this up a bit and really bring this down a lot. Sure. Like I said, you guys know how to do all this stuff, so I'm not worried about that. But we can take this into Blender, into our game engine, into whatever. I'm just gonna mirror this now. Give it a new material. And we can drag our maps in. I think it's still a little bit messed up. I don't remember what the conversion is. I don't know if it's this. That looks more right. Right. And this is in Blender, but this is something we could upload to Sketchfab or make a marmoset viewer for or whatever else. That is pretty much the whole process. We'll talk more about it in a couple weeks.